Good evening. We begin this hour in the tiny island community of Port Renfrew, where the volunteer fire chief says the next time that phone service goes out in his town, the fire department will not be involved in restoring the 911 system. As we showed you in December, a storm knocked out one of the radio towers that transmits phone service to Port Renfrew, and with no cellular coverage in the area, the fire chief had to come up with a plan of his own for a makeshift 911 system. But after offering to pay volunteers $10 an hour to monitor handheld radios for an emergency, the Capital Regional District is refusing to pay the bill.
As many as 400 people live in and around Port Renfrew. That number jumps by a few thousand on busy summer weekends. And with no cell phone service available, a TELUS landline is the only way to reach 911. In December, a storm damaged one of the radio towers that transmits phone service to Port Renfrew, prompting the fire chief to take action.
There was nobody that was going to take responsibility for getting Port Renfrew 911 service. So I talked to the rest of the officers in the fire department, and we decided to take out all the radios out of our fire trucks and distribute them throughout the community, so that if you had an emergency, you'd run to that person's house, who would then call the fire hall, who could call for emergency service.
Fire Chief Dan Tennant says he offered to pay the volunteers $10 an hour because he says they were being asked to monitor the radios 24 hours a day. The Fuca emergency program, which falls under the Capital Regional District, is in charge of emergency response in the area. But when presented with the $2,000 bill, Tennant says the CRD told him he didn't have the authorization to offer to pay volunteers. Mike Conlon is one of the people who is owed money.
There's a point where volunteerism just gets a little carried away. I think that they should really seriously look at that.
There are 12 volunteers at the Port Renfrew Fire Department, including the fire chief. They've decided to take it upon themselves to try to raise the money to pay this $2,000 bill. If they can't come up with the cash, the fire chief says he may have to step down.
It's sad. For $2,000, the next time Port Renfrew is going to be on their own, because the RCMP and the ambulance service aren't stationed in Port Renfrew, and CRD is not stationed here, so the only people that can step up to the plate and do anything is the fire department.
No one with the CRD was available to comment on camera, but a spokesman says Tennant may be able to take the bill to a local committee responsible for fire service in the area. The CRD says the province has confirmed it won't pay, and TELUS hasn't been asked. Steps are being taken to improve 911 service in the area. This tower beside the fire hall will soon connect Port Renfrew to CREST, the Capital Region's emergency communication system. The fire chief says the problems with 911 have left him wondering how small communities like Port Renfrew will be treated if a large emergency happens.
Eric Thompson joins us now with more. Eric, why is the chief so prepared to take a stand and step down over the issue?
Hudson, Dan Tennant says it's just a matter of principle for him. He says he gave his word to volunteers they would be paid. He says if that doesn't happen, he may consider resigning, but that may not be easy. Tennant says there is no one ready to step into his position in the near future. Meanwhile, the CRD says it is still looking into the issue.
All right, Eric Thompson, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now on a story we brought you earlier this evening on A News, a Nanaimo business owner who has been watching A News via satellite in Mexico has called us to offer to donate $250 to help pay volunteer firefighters in Port Renfrew. We showed you earlier tonight that in December, a storm damaged one of the radio towers that transmits phone service in the tiny island community. And with no cellular coverage in the area, the town's fire chief had to come up with a plan of his own for a makeshift 911 system. But after he offered to pay his volunteers to monitor handheld radios, the CRD wouldn't pay the bill. A-News reporter Eric Thompson joins us now with an update on the story. Eric.
Hudson, Tim Sanga owns Industrial Plastics in Nanaimo. He called a few minutes ago from La Paz, Mexico. He offered to donate the money to help pay those volunteers, and he's challenging other business owners to do the same. Sanga is a volunteer himself with the East Wellington Fire Department. With no cell phone service available in Port Renfrew, a TELUS landline is the only way to reach 911. In December, a storm damaged one of the radio towers that transmits phone service, so that prompted the chief to take action. He says he offered to pay volunteers $10 an hour because they were being asked to monitor the radios 24 hours a day as part of that makeshift 911 system. The Fuca emergency program, which falls under the Capital Regional District, is in charge of emergency response in the area. When Tennant presented them with the bill for $2,000, Tennant says the CRD told him he didn't have authorization to offer to pay volunteers. And Hudson, the CRD says the province won't pay the bill. They haven't asked TELUS, and the CRD is still looking into the issue.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it, see if any other businesses take the challenge.
And they can feel free to give us a call if they would like to take Tim up on his offer.
All right, Eric Thompson. Eric, thanks.